Women, what happened when you ran into an incel? Viewers edition. I'm not really that surprised that there was this much conversation and discussion about this particular topic on a question like this one posted on an internet forum. A place that's certainly not known for having a high congregation of these types of people. Let's see what the viewers had to say. Story 1. Actually, looks aren't as important as a guy. Looks are far more important if you're a woman. As a man, you can make yourself desirable in all kinds of ways. Bad-looking women have it much harder to compensate for a lack of good looks. There are many things that can make a woman attracted to a man, looks being one of them. But looks alone don't get you very far if you're looking for a serious relationship. That being said, no matter how you look, hygiene and body care is extremely important, as well as how you carry yourself, posture, clothing, etc. Number 1, so isn't that the same for you? Wouldn't you rather take the most beautiful, attractive woman you can get? Why not only date a 10 out of 10? Prime Angelina Jolie, Halle Berry, Jessica Alba, fill in the blank. Instead, you then settle for the one you can actually get. That's why it's a dating market, and why the term sensual market value exists. It's a market. You trade, barter, haggle, and make a value proposition. Are you a good or bad salesman? This isn't a one-sided thing. Do you play to your strengths or to your weaknesses? Do you know your strengths and weaknesses? Is your assessment realistic? Have you worked on them? Like I already said, men are even more focused on looks than women are, and that's a fact. So your point about women only caring about looks is kind of moot in my eyes. If you think men have it bad in the looks department, women have it twice as bad. Yeah, looks matter. No one looks all determining. You will find worse-looking men with hotter chicks because of a better personality, more games, better humor, being fun to be around, enjoyment, higher IQ, social and raw, more self-confidence, higher status, etc. My personal hypothesis is that men who get caught up on not looking good enough fail to realize all the other things and traits they could theoretically develop but haven't, and are lacking, that would compensate for the looks. It's just too easy to say it's all only looks when insight is not particularly abundant. What percentage of women choosing a mate do you think pertains to looks? 45, 50, 80, 90, 95%? Number 2, I don't think just blanketly blaming feminism for everything under the sun pertaining to dating is really a high enough resolution analysis to be worth anything at all. The problem is probably worse in the USA than in Europe. It's like the people blaming capitalism for everything bad in the world. It's just too easy to choose the one variable you can't control because then one can tell themselves, oh, it's really not my fault. I'm actually a great guy. It's only this one thing I was born with and can't control. It's a great way to shirk responsibility. I think not taking responsibility for one's own fate and taking on a victim mentality is also a hallmark of the incel, and there is nothing less attractive to a woman than a man who feels himself to be a victim of circumstance. Yes, some have been dealt better hands, some have been dealt worse hands, but some with worse hands have played them better than many with better hands. No comment on this guy's philosophy, but I would disagree with the woman that he listed. For me, Alison Brie all the way. Story 2. But that doesn't erase the fact that looks are one variable of many, and the importance of looks also gets inflated with anything digital because it's only reduced to photo and text. But ask yourself this, would you rather be an ugly guy or an ugly girl? I'd pick being an ugly guy 10 out of 10 times, because you have a much better chance of still acquiring a desirable partner. The feeling I get from you is that you take looks as an excuse. Of course, good looks help, that's obvious, but mostly rejection won't be due to only looks. It's just much easier to rationalize it that way and blame it on looks instead of deeply introspecting yourself and seeing what the issue is and what you can do about it. Okay, maybe your personality is the issue. Maybe that's really hard to change. I don't know what your place is, but I do know that the psyche of the human being is a very tricky thing. We are seldom honest to ourselves. Yes, some variables are legitimate, but are inflated and given disproportionate weight. If I had 10 points that I would have to distribute over attributes like intelligence, social skills, physique or physical attractiveness, height, etc., I would probably want to distribute most of it on intelligence and personality, broad term, and have at least enough points in looks to not be repulsive. A full disclosure, I'm a somewhat good-looking guy. Still, looks are really only a fraction of what's actually important, and many women will tell you that even unattractive men become attractive when they exhibited certain traits. Also, one question, what exactly falls under looks? Because we use physical appearance as a marker of health. So even if a person isn't great looking, they better make sure they look as healthy as they can. Why would someone want you if you don't look healthy? Two main cliche sayings come to mind for this one. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, or the beholder, and beauty is only skin deep. I definitely believe that you got to have more substance beneath the surface if you want to present yourself as being attractive and worth pursuing and courting somebody else. And at the same time, I think there's someone out there for everybody, and people have different tastes in people, appearance-wise, character-wise, and I think that if you just keep putting yourself out there and being true to yourself, as cliche as that sounds, that you will find someone who loves you for you. But you have to put in the work and make yourself something worth seeking. And that's got to be beyond skin deep. It's got to be beyond appearance. Yeah, you got to have something worth presenting. Story 3. Exactly. Especially the just mom. Does this man even know how much goes into being a mother? I don't know if she was a particularly good mother, but still, there must have been a lot of energy invested in him. Also, back in the days, women weren't only moms either. Life was hard for everyone, and making a living for a family wasn't easy. So as a factory worker, your wife would also work outside, and if you had a smaller, handy job, your wife would be there to work as well. Only rich people could afford to do nothing. As for today, still not easy. Maybe as a stay-at-home mother, you can concentrate more energy onto your child's or children, but the standard for children today is so high that most moms totally pressure themselves because they want the best for their child, as well as that staying at home is not that affordable for most people. So again, just mom has to put double the energy in while working a job and then taking care of everything at home, only to have a son that tells her dad is a hero and she is just mom, as all women should be. Love how that also implies that women are only meant to be mothers and not be their own person besides that. They don't have any value other than being a mother. They don't have a life before motherhood and not after. They don't have any interests and hobbies, no dreams, and nothing they want to achieve outside of a family, etc., etc. That's just so untrue. Why wouldn't women be their own person with their own lives and dreams? OP here really dodged a bullet. For me, the biggest thing I'm grappling with lately as a new dad, I don't necessarily want my whole identity to be reduced to father now. I want to try my best to maintain a sense of self beyond everything that I do for my family. And I know it's easier said than done. Any advice is welcome. Story 4. It wasn't a personal jab at you, it was an example of an essential step to take. But I think I did sound way too optimistic there. So here's my point in a nutshell. I by no means support the idea that 50-50 exists. We are all equal but different and need women to accept that. Both sides have had faults when regarding the other, but men have had to practically shoulder all blame and improvement while our issues have been outright ignored or rejected. I agree heavily with figures such as Jordan Peterson, who's a genuinely great thinker and has done so much good for dejected young men. And while they do aspire to a future of improvement, there is a harsh truth for the time being. That is, you gotta be capable and powerful and self-improve, yes. When I say a good or decent man, I was saying you have to control the anger and not end up blaming women for everything wrong in your life, 'cause it just isn't true. A good and decent man is a man who does objectively good and decent things. Hate becomes a poison in your soul, and I'm afraid women do decide if you're worthy or not. They pick their partners. You gotta hustle, get in good shape, and get capable. It's not fair, but you gotta do it, not just for a woman, but for your own future. But at the end of the day, there are good women, and it's not their faults. But you basically gotta work on yourself and find your own drive in life to achieve. Only then will it start happening. Story 5. Hey man, you never know until you try. Obviously, as I saw in your other comments, you are content in your life right now, and thus not looking to actively pursue. This is totally fine, and by no means am I saying you need to try now and always keep trying. I'm more saying to not assume someone from your ideal type will not want you too. My partner is not technically my ideal type, as I prefer Middle Eastern or Latino, but they are the ideal person for me. Sure, looks do play a part in the dating world. Let's be honest about this. We do tend to make certain first judgments on appearances, as we are all human. However, seeing that same person in action, being personal with you, having fun with friends, what have you, plays a larger part for most people. Oftentimes, one small interaction already overrides many judgments made by first impressions based on appearances. My current partner initially was just average to me when I first saw them. A bit chubby, unkempt hair, but a well-kept beard. I love facial hair. And dressed in obviously old and worn clothes. An average Joe to me, personally. But then they saw me walking around our college campus at the time, instead of hanging out with a friend of theirs. This friend and I were talking, as one would call it, but not dating yet. Said friend was trying to get me to actually start dating. Story 6. Men have to have looks, and or all the other things, precisely because women are hypergamous. Because women are hypergamous and leverage pregnancy and access to intimacy against men, we only get to select women based on looks. I think at least 50% of selection is based on looks, and it's because about 45% of dating takes place on apps, and that is almost 100% looks-based primarily. Feminism is responsible for a lot of things, like turning human connection into a microtransaction. A lot of RP guys are teaching men how to survive in a society where you're basically prevented from being able to form meaningful connections with women. Because if you actually listen to what feminists say and take them seriously, it's not okay to approach women anywhere. But at the same time, you have to have enough lust to overcome social stigma and taboos created about approaching women. So it's like trying to find the asymptotes without ever getting to look at the equation, let alone express the equation in terms that are understandable to you. Oh, and if the line of what you want intersects an asymptote, you're a grapist. It's not that hard to understand why so many men are not dating anymore. Lesbian feminist extremists are the ones doing this to women on purpose. Story 7. I've dealt with this before. It's like 80% of the time all in their heads, nothing, and 20% of the time an anxiety disorder they're unmedicated or treated for. When I say all in their heads, I would tell them to imagine watching in third person a hypothetical conversation between her and someone and listing out the flaws and problems with her ability to communicate. Often, they'd say they're afraid of being creepy, cringe, or awkward. They do this because this is something very real for men to deal with. But it's sensually asymmetric. It's a big deal for men to be creepy, cringe, or awkward in an unattractive or scary way. Women? No. At least not with average or attractive women. Very ugly and fat women can be gross, creepy, annoying. Sorry, it's just how things work. But in reality, all these things in women actually come across as cute to guys. If you're struggling for words, stuttering, and awkward, it's adorable. Often, girls I worked with were unaware of this because they only had experience with men being like this. They never switched point of views or didn't know what our point of view was like. I'm one of the few people, I think, that spent a lot of time understanding both genders' points of view. Good luck, though. Therapy is good. Story 8. Don't do univariate analysis. Make a list of categories, looks being one of them. You think you score 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in all categories and only looks below 5? Why focus so hard on the single thing you can't control when there are so many other things you can control and work on? And to look, maybe an unhygienic 6 will slip down to a 5, and a super well-groomed 4 rises up to a 5. The differential between +1 and -1 is 2. Also, don't confuse looks with what you radiate. You radiate with what's inside of you. Often we conflate the two. But objectively, not so attractive people will be more attractive depending on what they radiate. In German, we say Ausstrahlung. Whatever example you give me, you will always find instances of some short, fat, ugly guy who has a 10 out of 10 girlfriend. There's a couple of a tiny dude without arms and legs who has a beautiful and kind wife. You can look them up on YouTube. He's funny, smart, and self-confident. Obviously, if you have nothing about you that's desirable or potentially attractive, then you've got a crummy hand. But don't chalk it up to looks and height. Don't be so one-dimensional. Story 9. Jesus, this was hard to listen to. I feel like I've met two kinds of incels. It all comes down to a couple factors of what damaging thing has happened in his life, his personality type, and what terrible internet rabbit hole he went down. I can understand the damaging events, and what internet BS snared you when you were a stupid kid and had no clue, and it rendered you a hopeless mess, but then there's also the key part of what personality you have, and so you then encounter genuinely sad guys who need help and a push out the door to get themselves together, because they just couldn't figure it out by themselves, or were never taught. And then there are the ones who leave you speechless at their terrible personality and views, and just leave you wanting to get the frick out, because the guy is just too far gone for anyone to be able to do anything. Dang, it all really makes you think that we should have listened to our parents more when they said to get off our phones and tech to go outside. This guy speak the true. Yeah, I don't envy the latest generation who has to navigate all the social complexities on top of all the added pressures and variables that comes with social media and modern tech. It can be super scary, but I think sometimes the best way to build genuine relationships is to take the leap, put yourself out there, and interact in person. Trying and failing and learning as you go. It's just too easy to get caught up in our own mindsets when we're cooped up inside, alone with our own thoughts and the self-affirming thoughts from the internet that just reinforce your already held beliefs. Story 10. Evolutionary-related hypothesis about gender differences in mate selection preferences were derived from Trivers' parental investment model, which contends that women are more likely than men to seek a mate who possesses non-physical characteristics that maximize the survival or reproductive prospects of their offspring, and were examined in a meta-analysis of mate selection research, questionnaire studies, analysis of personal advertisements. As predicted, women accorded more weight than men to socioeconomic status, ambitiousness, character, and intelligence, and the largest gender differences were observed for cues to resource acquisition, status, ambitiousness. Also, as predicted, gender differences were not found in preferences for characteristics unrelated to progeny survival, sense of humor, personality. Where valid comparisons could be made, the findings were generally invariant across generations, cultures, and research paradigms. Interesting, and makes sense. If a man is able to provide for his family, he's demonstrating an evolutionary trait that suggests security for the lineage, and thus that trait will naturally be propagated to future generations. I'd be curious to know, though, if these traits are all innate and passed down genetically, or if they must be learned generation to generation. Story 11. Once, I thought as simplistically, but you see plenty of guys uglier than yourself, with women who are objectively out of their league. Of course, there are some who really did get a bad deal, but even then, those who have made amazing effort on themselves have defied the odds of appearance. You only need to go out and about with friends, and you see the truth that we men these days have a severe issue with ourselves and mental health, and just gotta get on and put in some major effort into ourselves and not feel such spite and hate towards the world. Of course, there are still plenty of problems on both sides, but you must not kid yourself that it is just women's faults. It's a 50-50 split when it comes to finding a partner. There are so many good and decent women out there, but you have to be a good and decent man in order to be worthy of them. Story 12. That's great, man. All I'm saying is that if you're interested in finding meaningful connections with women and not just casual sleeping with them, it's incredibly difficult because of hypergamy, social media, online dating, and casual hookup culture. On top of all that, if you actually pay attention to feminists, you'll always be unsuccessful with women. So it's actually best to ignore women in general, unless it's in any kind of work capacity or something. I don't really struggle with women personally. I've adopted standards of not sleeping with women I wouldn't date long term, and that's basically made dating pretty much impossible. Women have shaped dating in such a way that if women don't find you immediately attractive, you're not in the game at all. It's not that hard to understand why there are so many men that are incels. Story 13. I'm sorry you went through that. As adults, those things that happen in school are often minimized, but they can and do have lasting effects. I wasn't bullied, but I could never seem to find a way to fit in either. I'm painfully awkward. I've tried everything you can think of, all in an effort to change my very nature, and I was always miserable. The positive change for me was when I just said, screw it. I guess this is who I am, and I have to live with that. It changed everything. I'm still awkward, but I'm not hating myself for it. I don't know if any of that resonates. I hope it helps in some way. Just know you're not deeply flawed or unworthy just because you're not the ideal. Story 14. In terms of attraction, my main strategies for those who don't want to be active, that is, women who refuse to make the moves and want him to, are to allow yourself to fulfill male fantasies. Men share common fantasies. I've forgotten the details of many, but one I remember was the caretaker fantasy. Guys like helping women they find attractive, and also like being helped. It's why a lot of them fall in love with nurses. I don't know you or your life, but contextually, find ways to allow yourself to be helped. The more involved and fun, the better. Or offer to help and nurse him. Story 15. I'm a 32-year-old woman, never had a boyfriend because of bullying and because of my education. Be careful, men are bad and only think about one thing. I know it's BS, but I've never had the chance in my teens to get used to speaking with men. And now I just don't know what to do. I just speak with men when I have a question or they ask me something, and I have zero idea how to flirt. I don't have high expectations. I just want a healthy relationship without dramas with a nice guy who can tolerate my very bad jokes. Story 16. That was a wonderful read for my start to the day. I love seeing happy endings, and I hope you both stay together for a long time and become your best selves. I've not been entirely honest. It is not just my scars that cause concern. I have many health issues that have me reconsider being capable of being there for someone. After reading this through and seeing people with similar situations thriving, I'm starting to see the possibility. I might reciprocate the next approach. I don't expect magic, but I think trying might be a good start. Thank you. Story 17. A lot of the science and statistics I found in research to help with coaching backed up my beliefs. I don't hate women over it, though. Rather, it's just they're evolved to be like that, and their extreme pickiness, etc., in sensual selection did help humans become healthier over millions of years by selecting only men with the best genes and health, so I owe a lot of my health to that, which is good. It contributes to male suffering on a global scale, sure, but also makes us a lot healthier as a species. Except in the movie Idiocracy, where instead of health, beauty, intelligence, and all the positive character traits being naturally selected over centuries of evolution, the poorest, least educated population has the most children due to lack of resources, and the quote, more desirable couples decide that having kids is not really financially wise. And then we end up with a planet full of stupid people who feed their plants Gatorade. Good movie, though. Story 18. As a former online coach of females, it's very straightforward. Nowadays, you should consider being the one to ask. You also need to completely get rid of any notion of playing hard to get, which guys hate. Likewise, flirting for shy women should be gradual. You don't need sensual innuendo right away. Start with friendly, innocent compliments and such, and escalate when you've become friends and comfortable with each other and his sense of humor. Story 19. I'm a 34-year-old virgin and a volcel. I suppose as I reject the idea of relationships and intimacy and avoided the topic and don't think about it. I was an intimacy relationship coach for girls from my teen years through my early 20s, and the horrors I witnessed led me to hate that stuff, aside from lesbian stuff, which is okay. It was one girl in particular who absolutely broke me, the straw on the camel's back. That story has been over a decade and still haunts me. Story 20. The only men who want to have long conversations with me are just men totally disparate about their celibacy, or have deep problems, such as alcoholism. I'm not paranoid. They ask me quickly to sleep with them, or just tell me big stories about their terrible exes. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.